This morning, I have the great pleasure to introduce one of our very own, Dale Hanson Bourke. She has been a longtime member of our congregation. She has written a new book that we're going to be hearing about, Strong Girls, Strong World, and it's she's going to help us think through how churches and Christian nonprofits are helping or hurting, and what are the specific ways that we can make a difference. Dale is an award-winning writer, an editor, a business owner, a foundation president. She served on several different boards and international development organizations, including World Vision, Opportunity International, and International Justice Mission. Dale, welcome. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much. It's always fun to be at National because there's always so many smart people here. And I know that there'll be people in this audience who know even more about some of the things I'll mention. So we'll try to leave some time at the end for your comments and questions, and hopefully we'll have a discussion at the end. So much has changed since the last time I spoke here. You have this beautiful new facility. It's amazing. I didn't find anybody wandering the parking lot looking for the entrance, which used to happen all the time. People were always looking, how do I get into this building? So that was great. I see that you now have coffee on every level. I noticed that. That's a huge improvement. Very happy to hear that. You have a new pastor. We're now part of your virtual congregation. We've moved to Annapolis, and so we usually listen online, and I've really enjoyed listening to Pastor Hilton. He's been great. And then, most importantly, the biggest change in our life is that we've become grandparents. My husband and I are now grandparents. And how many grandparents do I have in the audience? Oh, yeah, see, you know what I mean. It changes your life. So I'm so glad that Quinn asked me to come here and show you a few hundred slides of my grandchild, because no one is happier to have a captive audience than a grandparent. You think I'm joking? There she is. This is little Evie. Evie was born during the pandemic. Her name is Genevieve, but they call her Evie. She was born during the pandemic, and she lives in Washington State. So we didn't get to see her right away, but we looked at every picture that they sent us, and we were smitten right from the beginning. So, a few more slides? You thought I was kidding, didn't you? Oops. All right, here we have our first. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is she's so special. This is Evie. She's very loving. She's also very dramatic, and she's becoming quite the little fashionista. Now I know you're thinking that I think Evie's special because I'm her grandmother, and of course that's true. But I'm not the only one who thinks Evie is special. You see, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, even the Gates Foundation think that Evie is special. Oh. Evie has won the global birth lottery. She was born in a hospital. Her mom was healthy, and she had prenatal care and vitamins. Her birth was registered. She became a citizen. She's wanted, loved, and protected by her family. She has the care of pediatricians. She gets regular vaccinations. She has clean water. Her parents make sure that she's safe from environmental hazards. She doesn't even use regular detergent. She's safe from almost anything. And she's already started school and will continue as long as she wants. Now, I know that sounds like very common, but it isn't. It's a very uncommon thing in the world. And that's why Evie is so special. You see, there were 385,000 babies born on the same day as Evie. Whoops. It's amazing, and most of them didn't have the same benefits that she had. Over 6,000 of those babies died the first day. And 2.3 million children will die in their first month of life, which are very sobering statistics. So why does this happen? Well, this is just an overview of some of the reasons that children die. Many of them are so preventable and routinely preventable in our world. You'll see in the first quadrant the neonatal disorders, things that are easily treated in hospitals. A breech baby, a baby who takes a long time being born, a baby that just has to clear their passages, those things don't happen if there's not a hospital or a doctor present. And it's really sad because it's not just in the poorest countries. Some of us have been on mission trips to the Dominican Republic. We were just talking about a mission trip we took there. And in a lot of countries, even middle-class people can't afford to go to the hospital. The hospitals charge them if they want to come to the hospital and have a baby. They have to bring supplies with them. The hospitals don't have supplies. And so many babies are born without the care of doctors and nurses. And then in the first month of life, and in the early years, the things that take most of their lives are diarrhea, which is, again, so preventable and so treatable. But sadly, is one of the top causes of death in children. Most of our children now get vaccinated against the norovirus, which is one of the biggest causes of diarrhea, and that's not the case in many countries. And then there's pneumonia. Pneumonia is caused a lot in other countries because of indoor fires and cooking inside and the smoke that gets into children's lungs. And so it's another factor that causes pneumonia, and there's a real lack of pediatric antibiotics in many countries. So children don't get treated even when they have a common cold. When we have a cold that goes on too long, we take our children to the doctor, and they'll give them antibiotics, and that just isn't available in a lot of countries. And then, of course, there's also, as children get older, there's measles, malaria, tetanus, all of these things that don't get easily treated. And yet in our country, these are easily treatable. But even more than that, girls are disadvantaged in all of these areas. So they don't have a lot of statistics, but they do know that little baby girls die more than baby boys from all of these diseases. And this is a quote from the Gates Foundation. No matter where you're born, your life will be harder if you are born a girl. If you're born in a poor country, it will be even harder. When I first read this, I thought, well, sure, it's going to be a little bit harder to be a girl. But we think about all the girls who have, risen to the top in our country and in other countries. We've seen women leaders. And we think, well, maybe it's just a little bit harder. But I want to tell you that the more I did research for my book, the more I was shocked at what the tremendous obstacles girls face around the world. It's a quote from Edgar Sandoval, is the president of World Vision, and he has said that he considers among vulnerable children living in the world's poorest places, girls are even more vulnerable. This fact continues to strike me as one of the most under-addressed issues in our world. So this morning we want to talk a little bit about this under-addressed issue of girls in our world. I'm going to introduce you to a couple of other little girls. This little girl is not my granddaughter. She's a little girl I met in Jordan. She's a Syrian refugee. Her mother had escaped from the Syrian war and was alone with two daughters, and she came to a medical facility where I was volunteering. This little girl had terrible diaper rash. The pediatrician who was there said she'd never seen anything so bad. Because the mother was so poor, she was a refugee, she wasn't even able to buy diapers for this baby. She had pneumonia because they were living in a unheated facility, which was the best they could do. And she was also dehydrated and malnourished. Now, the irony of this is that this little girl had started out in a good family. They'd lived in Damascus. The parents were both teachers, but they'd been displaced by war, and she became so vulnerable because of the situation of where she was born. Maybe some of you saw this story a couple of weeks ago in the New York Times. It's a story of, it's both a sad story and a hopeful story. A story about a man from India. And this is when the nurse brought his baby out to give it to him. She said, when the nurse stepped out of the delivery room, her face turned somber, her voice dropped to a hush, almost like she was ashamed, as she announced to the family, "It is a daughter." And this story goes on to talk about how girls are so undervalued in India. In fact, India, which is a fairly developed country, now can do prenatal testing. And they have found that when they do prenatal testing and they are able to determine the sex, that in a good number of cases, they abort the baby if it's a girl because they don't value girls. And this man was really concerned about this trend. In fact, it's such a big trend in India and China and a number of other countries that they actually have an imbalance now. They have way more men than women because they have chosen to either abort the babies or to abandon baby girls. So he started a campaign, and this man, it was really very hopeful. He started a campaign to take this phrase, "it's a daughter," which had really been said as as something of shame or a curse, and go onto the internet and show people holding their daughters and being proud of them. So it's sort of like the girl dad thing, where they started, really trying to elevate the status of girls. And his efforts, they say, have probably saved hundreds of baby girls' lives as people began to value girls a little bit more. But these are the things that women are often told when they give birth to a baby girl in many countries. And I've heard some of these things. When I worked in Zambia, there was a view that if you had a baby girl, you were cursed. And if you had more than one baby girl, well, you were really cursed. And then there was a view that, your husband might leave you if you only gave birth to girls. She should hurry up and have a baby boy because boys were valued. And women who had only girls had bad luck. So what are some of the greatest challenges facing girls? We want to talk about this just in general terms. They lack access to health care and the willingness of the family to keep them healthy. They just don't value the girls, so therefore if it takes a trip to the clinic to get them immunized, if it takes extra effort to keep them healthy, it's just not going to happen. They often don't get to stay in school because they're not valued. They think it's important for boys to go to school, not girls. Girls are often the victims of gender-based violence. It happens way too frequently, and girls get blamed. Even little girls are raped, are attacked, and it's just a terrible scourge in many countries. Girls suffer from female genital mutilation, often called female circumcision or cutting. It happens in 23 countries in the world still, and even though it's illegal in many places, it's still culturally accepted and expected before a girl gets married. Child marriage is still a huge problem. And most girls are affected by the lack of clean water. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute. It's also shocking, when I started doing my research, I was shocked by how little legal protection girls have. In some countries, they're explicitly, they have no protection at all, and others, they are precluded from being protected by the law. And I'll, again, talk a little bit more about this in a minute. And most are at risk. The most people at risk in the world are vulnerable girls. Girls who are refugees, like the little girl that I showed you a picture of, girls who are stateless, and girls who are disabled. Some of the health challenges girls face. Well, girls' births are often not registered. This is, just, again, one of these things that shocks you. But if a girl's birth is not registered, if something happens to her, there's no problem for the family. So it's a terrible thing to just not register girls' births, which is also part of the problem of trying to follow them and statistically understand what's happening to them. Girls are not given priority in nursing. In many countries, women will have multiple children, one right after another, and so they'll be nursing more than one child. And so typically what will happen is the boy will get the first advantage, and if there's any milk left, that'll be given to the girl. But it's a huge problem, and girls are malnourished often because of that. Girls who are sickly are left to die. Again, there's the superstition, well, maybe they're cursed. We'll just let them die. Girls may be abandoned. I had a situation in Zambia where somebody on the staff's sister had given birth to a baby that had a birthmark. And there's a lot of superstition in some countries, and they believed that this birthmark might mean that she was cursed. So they took this baby to a traditional healer, sometimes called a witch doctor. And they never saw the baby again. And they said that he apparently had tested her and found out that she was cursed, and she was never returned to the family. So terrible things happen to babies. Girls are less likely to be vaccinated. They're more likely to suffer from home-related injuries. So the girls will work in the home with open fires, work around the stoves, often suffer from burns. You can imagine little girls, being around open fires. And then again, female genital mutilation, it's dangerous. It's often deadly, it's often done with unclean instruments, and it often creates future health issues. And then girls die in childbirth. Girls are not meant to be pregnant. Their little bodies are not ready to be pregnant, and yet here is a statistic that is just horrifying to me. Pregnancy is the #1 cause of death among 15 to 19-year-old girls. That's just astounding. Let me show you now. We're talking about statistics, but I'd like to show you a real live little girl and let me introduce you to a little girl named Shamima. She's 10 years old.
My name is Shamima. I am 10 years old. I want to recite a poem entitled, I Want to Marry. I want to marry, but I didn't say I am in a hurry. I want to wear a pretty dress, that dress called uniform. I want to live in that neighborhood, that place called childhood, where I will dream of the pink unicorn. Before by natural order I move into adulthood. I want to marry, but I don't want to be the youngest bride in town. Before I might wear a matriculation gown. I want to wear a wedding gown with a halo and diamond crown. But could this be after I worn my graduation gown? I want to don my maternity gown, smiling down at my beautiful innocent son. But I don't want to shoot my ambition down in fulfillment of our society's backwards plan. Someday I want to marry, but most definitely I'm not in a hurry. Thank you.
So Shamima is only 10 years old, and she's obviously an amazing little girl. I mean, you could imagine her becoming president of her country someday. And yet at 10 years of age, she is worried about getting married, because that's probably what's going to happen. She lives in rural Ghana, and in her culture, she will be married before she is able to wear her matriculation gown, as she says, before she's able to finish her education, which is a real loss to the world, as you can imagine. I mean, she is such a gifted little girl. And it's such a shame to lose the giftedness of children like that, little girls like that, because they are married off so early and they don't get to finish school. So some of the challenges girls face with education are they're simply not supported. I was interviewing a woman who is actually one of the top leaders in Zambia. She has a PhD. She's done incredible things. And I said, what was the most difficult part of your education? And I imagined she'd say maybe getting her PhD, having to leave her family, go to the US to get her PhD. She said, the hardest part was leaving my mother when I was a little girl, because it meant she had to do extra work. And so sending a little girl off to school means that there's more work to do in the home. And sometimes the mothers don't want the little girls to go to school. It means that there's a lot more work, or other sisters don't want the girls to go to school. And it's basically viewed that boys are the ones who need to go to school. Another challenge is just distance to school. There aren't school buses in a lot of parts of the world. Children have to walk miles to school, and it's dangerous. Girls get attacked by animals, our predators come after them. It's very difficult to get to school in some places. The cost of a uniform is often the barrier to a girl going to school. There are some organizations that just literally raise money for school uniforms for girls because families can't afford the uniform for a girl to go to school. Not only are girls asked to stay home and work, sometimes girls are literally loaned out to another relative, sometimes an older man, which sadly is not just about work. It's about companionship. And these poor little girls are given to a relative. A huge problem that we really don't talk about, maybe we're just embarrassed to talk about, is there's lack of access to toilets and privacy in a lot of places. This is especially true in schools, where girls don't have private toilets. And so this becomes a real problem, especially when they begin their periods, because then they don't have a place to go. So they'll often stay home and they'll get behind. There's a big push to try to get facilities for girls in schools now. And again, early marriage, which we've talked about, and displacement. WASH, for those of you who are development people, know that WASH is the sort of the big acronym given to water, sanitation, and hygiene. And these are three areas that all work together. So if you don't have enough water, if you only have drinking water, you're probably not doing your hand washing. You're not keeping clean because the water is so precious. You can only use it for drinking. And then, of course, if you have poor sanitation, your water source is going to get polluted. So these all work together. They all have to be addressed at the same time. And girls are often, the first job a little girl, my little Evie, who's 3 years old, would probably already have her first job, which was to gather water for the family. Girls, because they can hold a bucket, they're sent off to gather water. And this is actually a very dangerous job. I mean, they go to a water source that is often the source for animals as well. So they're going to collect clean water, but often it's not that clean. They bring it back to the home. It's hard for them to carry. And then lack of proper sanitation causes disease in girls. Again, poor sanitation means that the ground is often polluted from human waste. Children are playing on the ground. A lack of private sanitation makes women and girls vulnerable. If they want to go somewhere private to go to the bathroom, they're then vulnerable. They're alone, and they're vulnerable to both animals and to predators. And as we've said, many schools lack toilets. And the girls fall behind because they're menstruating. And then legal rights. Girls are more vulnerable in following areas. It's a legal right to be born, which sounds so strange, but in many countries, again, children are being, they're doing prenatal testing just to test for sex, and then girls are being aborted. Legal right to be registered at birth, to have legal status. If you are not registered, you have no legal status in the country. The right to obtain citizenship, which is not even a legal right in many countries, if you could believe that. Girls don't have the right to be citizens. And what that means is that, so if a girl then wants to move somewhere or go somewhere without her father or without her husband, she's stateless. The choice of a boyfriend. Now, I've spent some time in Jordan, and it's a wonderful country. I love the country of Jordan. It's very modern in many ways. But within 1 week I was there, I read about 2 honor killings, one from a Muslim family and one from a Christian family. The Muslim family had found out that their daughter was seen alone with a Christian boy. She wasn't even dating him. She was just seen alone with him. And the family, to maintain their honor, killed her. The father killed her. The Christian family found out that their daughter was interested in a Muslim boy. And again, the same thing happened. Now, these honor killings are, yes, against the law, but men are not prosecuted if they are doing an honor killing because they are trying to preserve the honor of their family, and killing their daughter is considered to be part of preserving the honor of their family. And this is a very modern country. And then also in that same trip, we met some wonderful young women, very professional young women who had great professions, advanced degrees. And we asked them if they would want to come to the U.S. so that we could have them speak. And they said, well, we would have to have a chaperone. We would have to have, and these are women in their 20s who had finished their degrees, they were professionals, but they couldn't travel without the chaperone of a brother or a father to come with them. Girls don't inherit property in many cases. They're not legally able to inherit property. And they're not able to get a job without permission. These are actual laws in place in many countries. And then vulnerable women and girls. This was another thing that just shocked me as I was doing research. There are 1.3 billion people worldwide who are disabled, and 80% of them are in the developing world, which is just incredible. And there are a lot of reasons for this. Some of it is what we would call cousin marriage. Their intermarriage is within the village or within a tribe. There's not prenatal testing to be able to help with disabilities. There's not surgery to help with things like clubfoot or cleft palate. It just isn't available. Statelessness is becoming a huge problem in this world, especially among women and girls. They don't have citizenship. They flee war, they flee as refugees, or again, in a bad situation, a woman leaves marriage with her children and she no longer has citizenship. Her husband still holds the citizenship and she is stateless. Another problem is street children. This is a really sad term that I learned as I was researching my book. Not only runaways, but they're called throwaways now. Children who are literally abandoned by their families. And it happens in the US. It happens here because we have a huge drug problem. We have people who don't want to be reminded of a child from a previous relationship. They will be abandoned. And they're called throwaway children. It's a terrible thing. There's a lot of problems we know with sex trafficking, where children are not only trafficked for sex, but also for labor and child soldiers. And displaced people, as we've talked about. There are more than 100 million displaced people in the world right now, which is just incredible. So why should we care? I know this is a caring congregation, and I know you folks care about these issues, and I appreciate being here to talk to you about that. Well, part of it is practical, and part of it is moral. Practically, there's an economic cost to the world. The World Bank estimates that there's $15 to $30 trillion lost, it's just amazing, in lifetime productivity and earnings by girls who are not able to go to school and then become productive. And of course, we look at girls like Shamima, and we think, I mean, the potential that this little girl has, and what the world is losing by not letting this girl just continue to bloom and to grow. Girls who are given the opportunity tend to give back to their families, they give back to their communities, they give back to their countries. When girls stay in poverty, they perpetuate the cycle of poverty. They will tend to also then not be able to give their children a better life. And then there's just the injustice and growing gap between girls like my granddaughter Evie and girls like Shamima. Is it fair that a girl like Shamima has so many fewer possibilities in her life than my little granddaughter? I don't think so. We have a Christian responsibility to care for the least of these, and certainly girls are the least of these in many parts of the world. And finally, we can make a difference if we choose to act. So this is the part where you have to sit up and listen, because I'm going to tell you what you can do. It's a little bit of a dated video, but it's a little bit old, but because they were concentrating more on HIV. But it's so exciting to think about this, that we can invest in a girl and really change the world. And this is what I have realized as I've been doing the research for my book. And one of the reasons that I think it's so important to give you all some resources to use as you move forward and think about what you can do. So I'm going to just concentrate briefly now on the 3 things that I would like us to consider. First, you've been here today, and I appreciate the fact that you're coming and you're starting to educate yourself about what we can do. So these are some resources. Some of you have probably read Half the Sky. It's a great book. It's good to go back and read it again. There's another book, and I do have all of these written out on this resource list that you can get at the back, so you don't have to worry too much about getting this all down. This is a story about a book written by a girl who nearly starved to death, and some UN workers came and helped her, and then she ended up being able to work for the UN, which is just sort of a lovely story of. And this is my book, which will be out in about another month. So you can become an advocate for girls. Everyone here has a voice that can be used to help girls in the world. You can sign up for advocacy alerts, and you can get information from some of these organizations. Again, I'll give you the websites for all of them. I regularly get alerts from these different organizations that tell me if there's legislation pending that I can influence my congressmen or senators about. There are certain bills, actually, right now, some of you may know about them, that will tie our foreign aid to certain things like keeping girls in school and reducing violence against girls. So we are able as American citizens to advocate for these things, and it's important to do so. There's I showed you just a brief picture of an online course called The Girl Child and Her Long Walk to Freedom. This is a really interesting online resource developed by a foundation, and some of you may want to join it. You join in a virtual study group, and then usually once every couple of weeks or once a month, you join other people from all over the world who are also studying this program. It would be a really cool thing for the church to consider doing, or some people to do individually. I've done it, and it's really wonderful, because when you get on your Zoom call, you see people from all over the world, and they get to talk about their experiences. You can follow a great organization called Girls Not Brides, which works against child marriage. And then there are a couple of other organizations here that provide great information about girls. One of the things, and I told Evangeline I was going to do this, I would challenge you to ask your mission partners, how do they prioritize girls in the work they do? And maybe, this may be a question they wish you would ask, because sometimes it's hard to get priority on programming for girls. So ask your mission partners, and also any of the organizations that you support, how do they prioritize girls? You might get an interesting answer. And in fact, a lot of programs for girls suffer from lack of funding. You can encourage girls by mentoring if you are a tutor. Encourage girls and promote better policies in the U.S. One of the reasons that the U.S. has a hard time advocating against child marriage is that a number of our states still have child marriage laws in place, if you can believe that. They are starting to get a little older, but we actually had, up to a year ago, there was the age of 14 where you could be married in certain states. So as Americans, we can't advocate to other countries against child marriage when we don't have it in place ourselves. So this is something. And then the other thing that I really it's heartbreaking, is to see our foster care system. It is not in good shape, and so many of the girls fall out of foster care and become runaways, and then fall into sex trafficking. It's one of the greatest predictors. Being a foster child is one of the greatest predictors that you will fall into sex trafficking, which is a terrible statistic. You can sponsor a girl child. There are various sponsorship organizations, and in many of them, you're able to write to the girl, you're able to write to your child, but encouraging your child to think bigger, to stay in school, to do all of those things that will make her life better. You can also support loans to girls. In that little film strip, they talked about loans. And these are organizations where you can actually, and again, this is in the handout, where you can actually choose a girl specifically, or a young woman, and support her business and give her loans, which will change her life. You can support girls and women's health Medical Teams International, MAP International, the Fistula Foundation, various things that they do. One is birthing kits, so that when we talk about babies dying at birth, just providing a clean sheet of plastic and a clean razor so that when women give birth, the baby doesn't die of infection because the umbilical cord hasn't been cut with a dirty instrument or a rock. That makes a huge difference. You can also fund things like oral rehydration, which again helps children who have diarrhea. You can fund antibiotics for children. And then local groups. This is a purse I brought as a show and tell. This is from a group called Chikambuso in Zambia. A friend of mine started this. These are actually made out of plastic bags that women and girls will actually create themselves, and they are supporting themselves by creating these bags. And I've got the website information for you. They do this and they do other handcrafts that support girls. And I just love local groups that do these kinds of things. And I know that National supports a lot of local groups. And one of my favorites is Casa de Luz in Dominican Republic, which is a mission partner of NPC. If you've ever gone there, you will just, your heart will be broken, and then you will be so encouraged by what they do for especially disabled children. They do a remarkable job. And it's all supported by individual donations. And then I just want to say that, sometimes you hear about building wells or sponsoring toilets. Those aren't, you probably don't think those are very exciting things, but they make a huge difference in the lives of girls. Excuse me. And then there's the PAD project, which I'll give you, there's a Netflix show you can see called Period End of Sentence, and it talks about a really neat and unique project where girls are actually entrepreneurially creating menstrual pads that then they give to other girls, and they're able to stay in school and also to support themselves. So, and then just make girls a priority in your giving. Just ask, how are girls a priority? And finally, and not so finally, let's see here. Okay, pray for girls. We believe in the power of prayer, and I so encourage you to pray for girls around the world, because there are girls in vulnerable situations right now who need our prayer. And these are just some prayers that I'll just let you look at and perhaps say to yourself. They were created by a group called GEMS. But let's just take a minute to read these to ourselves. Amen. I want to thank you for your time, and I want to save some time for us to discuss, and I also want to challenge you to go and just do one thing to make the world a better place for girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale.
Sure.
The beginning part was pretty depressing, wasn't it? Those statistics were really hard. But if you heard Dr. Hilton's sermon this morning, God values each one of us, and we got there. God values these girls. So thank you for bringing this to our attention. Do you have some questions for Dale today?
Thank you, Dale. I would love to hear a little bit about what inspired you to write your book, Strong Girls, Strong Women.
Thank you. Well, Evie inspired me. I have had the good fortune of serving on the boards of many international organizations and seeing the reality around the world. And so when I saw my little granddaughter and realized all the potential, and of course, believed that she could do anything. I mean, she'll be president or she'll be, whatever she wants to do. It really broke my heart to start thinking about the other little girls that I had known in the world who would never have these opportunities. And so many opportunities that we just take for granted. And so then when I started looking into it and realizing there was so much we could do. So I'm glad you mentioned this, because my book, it can be depressing to write about these things, but what I've tried to do in my book is give a lot of resources. So there are little projects and big projects you can take on that will make a difference in the lives of girls. And I really believe it's to me, I was very involved with the HIV/AIDS crisis, and everybody did just a little bit. We never found a cure for AIDS, which is just remarkable. We don't even talk about AIDS very much anymore. But everybody got involved, and people did something on every level, and we were able to push back the scourge that was really the pandemic. And I think the same is true with girls. I think if we pay attention, if we each do something to make a difference, we can really change the world for girls.
Sure.
I'm a new mom of a 1-year-old daughter, so this was all very touching. How do you coach girls? We are in a broken world. Life is not fair, and that's a reality. And we can make it better, but there's big gaps, and a lot of fallout can be, why isn't it fair? How do you coach girls through that reality?
Yeah. In my book, I concentrate mostly on girls who are in different parts of the world, but it's a big problem here, and at different points, the president of World Vision actually used to work for Procter & Gamble, and he sponsored the program Like a Girl. I don't know if you remember those ads, Like a Girl, where they would show a girl throwing and they'd say, is that like a girl? And they tried to influence how we perceive, even in this culture, what is like a girl? Is it a weakness or is it a strength? And I think that's part of what we need to keep doing in our own culture, is making sure that being a girl is a beautiful thing, is something that's valued. And also, adolescence is a very scary time for girls, especially in this country and everywhere, because their self-esteem tends to drop. So I think we need to really concentrate on girls during adolescence. So.
Okay, I don't want to be the one to ask this, but I will. You must have seen the new movie Barbie. Comments.
I haven't seen it yet. Sorry. Does somebody else want to comment on it? What I have heard is it's empowering to girls. I don't know if that's true, but I don't know.
It occurs to me that I'm sure that, like, the Gates Foundation can work in the priority for girls and what they do.
Yeah.
When we look at the World Bank, we look at the regional development organizations and all these other organizations. I know they are very careful about conditionality in their loans and projects, but they can prioritize. So I'd like you to say, to what extent is the effort to prioritize for girls being successfully marketed to these aid organizations?
Oh, to the institutional, yeah. Well, again, I think that this is one of those places where, as individuals, if they start hearing people say, we value this in our giving, we value this as citizens, we value girls, it rises to the higher level. The World Bank is pretty good about valuing women and girls in their programs. They really do see this problem, and they see it as an economic problem, which is, I think, very interesting. That, they see that not using the resources of a girl like Shamima is just a waste. I mean, this little girl has so much potential to do great things in the world, and why wouldn't we invest in her? And because investing in her, she will go on and invest in her family and her community. And that's one of the things that I like about that little film strip, because it really does show that, girls they're remarkable. You give them a little bit and they go back and they just invest in their communities with loans and that type of thing. So from what I've seen, they're doing a decent job. I think culturally there's always a problem. They're always fighting against culture. And small villages and small thinking and all of those things. Yeah.
What was it like for you to be in a country trying to advocate for girls? Did you get feedback from men? I mean, what was that experience like?
Well, I didn't actually live in Zambia. I ran a foundation. I would go for several weeks at a time, but I worked with people who were working there. And one of the things that was so interesting, and World Vision did a great program in Zambia where they were trying to bring down gender-based violence. And so even in the home, they were talking to men and women about violence. And one of the things that they said was that sometimes these cultural things are so embedded that they would get to the men and they would say, you really have to stop beating your wives, this is not a good thing, and they would agree with that. And then they'd go to the women, and the women would say, oh, he beats me because he loves me. If he doesn't beat me, I guess he doesn't love me. And there was such a perverted view of what love meant and what, this has been perpetuated for generations. And sometimes the mother-in-laws are very big in Zambia. They would tell their future daughter-in-law, well, he's going to beat you. You've got to be expecting this. I mean, this is something that was just being perpetuated in culture. So in some cases, the men were more receptive than the women. It's just again, when things get perverted, we all buy into those perverted systems and get meaning from things that we shouldn't.
I wanted to follow up on what you were just talking about, is the views of the folks themselves within the country. And I wanted to ask you, sort of from your experience in these countries, what would be the major 2 or 3 things that would make a difference from their perspective? And I bring this to you because Melinda Gates's book was, traveling the world, capturing those things. And it was interesting because she found birth control as one of the major pieces that allowed them economic opportunity.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether you have got 1 or 2 things that you've captured from their testimonies.
Thank you. Yeah, and I should have recommended her book. It's a very good book. First of all, I mean, one of the things that it really hadn't been on my radar, but sponsoring a well in a village is one of the best things you can do for a girl, because a girl's time will be freed up. She won't have to go to gather water. She'll be able to go to school. She'll have clean and, hopefully sanitary water. So, when you hear people say, oh, build a well, you don't really think about the implications of that. But that is one of the best things you can do. The other thing is to help support sanitation. Again, I am a huge fan of helping schools get toilets and that type of thing. And then, again, when you look at where are the critical points, keeping a girl in school is so important. And so, again, school uniforms and that type of thing are really critical for girls. Thank you. I would say that the other thing that, besides praying, is you can, if you sponsor a child, you can write notes back. And they do get those notes. I have, that is one of the things. I've been on the board of World Vision, and I've gone to little villages where they have nothing, and they will pull out a letter that they have from their sponsor, and that's the most precious thing that they have. So they do receive them, and it's a great encouragement to them. So. Okay.
How much will girls be impacted if PEPFAR isn't reauthorized?
Oh, yeah. PEPFAR, for those of you who don't know, is the President's emergency plan for AIDS relief. What went into effect 20 years ago and has saved countless lives, especially of women and girls, because they get infected and are able to be treated. And without PEPFAR, most of these countries can't afford to continue to provide these antiretrovirals to them. And it will be a terrible thing. And I do want to address, having been on the ground, I know there's some talk that this has something to do with abortion. It absolutely does not. It has nothing to do with abortion. PEPFAR, these are antiretrovirals given to women to keep them healthy, and also to their newborns to keep them from being infected. So I'm very saddened to hear the controversy over PEPFAR, because it's a wonderful program.
Mine's going to be a statement, I guess, of a personal experience with this cultural thing you face. It goes back, it's many years ago, but I was teaching a 3-year course of high school physics in northeastern Nigeria.
Oh, wow.
And I was also teaching algebra. And we had, I know one of my algebra classes, I had a girl who wanted to take physics. Well, girls, this was a Christian school, but culturally aware, and girls were not allowed to take physics. So we finally got the principal to agree to allow her to audit my beginning year. And she get no credit or didn't have to take tests. Well, she did, and she took the test. And she was always #1 in the class. The boys had a hissy fit that she was in the class even. But Lydia's her name. You can pray for Lydia if you want to.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for that. That's a great story. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Dale. This has been so illuminating, and we just so appreciate you. Let me pray for you, and we're going to pray one of these prayers for the girls. Let's bow our heads. Lord, we thank you for Dale and for her passion for looking into this situation, Lord. We thank you for her ability to write well, and we, Lord, just ask that your hand would continue to bless Dale as she does her work for your glory. And Lord, God, may our girls who need us, and our world needs our girls, may each girl live out the unshakable truth that you love and value her, and that she can impact our world for you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.